Can we agree that AI is moving fast? And that as marketing leaders, some of you are perplexed, some of you are embracing the technology, some of you are challenged by it, some are way out on the bleeding edge of the technology, and that as leaders in our organizations, and some of you in larger companies that deal with bureaucracy on an everyday basis, how do you get teams to work together? How do you innovate under this umbrella of AI? How do you make sense of it all and have a corporate mission to sort of take this thing to the next level, bring people together, innovate, manage personality, and I'll go on record, because we're talking to a guy from NASA, manage a little bit of ego, because there's got to be some brilliant people at NASA, including James. So how do you bring all of those things together in a cohesive package to innovate and deliver? And if you think about NASA and what NASA has to deliver, well, they got to get shit right, don't they? So when we think about innovation and we think about AI, I am so humbled and honored to invite James Villarrubia to the stage. He is head of innovation and AI at Digital Innovation and AI at NASA, and he's offered to share his time with us today to share some of those insights and some of that information about how they really get things done at NASA and what he does to bring teams together and how they're leveraging AI to do that. So I believe there'll be time for your questions. James, come on up. Let's get this party started. Welcome. So, all right, all we got to say is, well, NASA. And so I got a chance to talk to James last week for about 20 or 30 minutes, and it was super cool to chit chat and get ready for this. And thank you to Kyle and the Digital Summit team for the prep that they did for this as well. But let's start with NASA. Tell me how you got to NASA and what being at NASA means, because you've got quite a storied career to this point.
So I think I'm a bit different than I would say most careerists at NASA. I am not a career NASA person. I don't have a PhD. There's a lot of PhDs at NASA. My career was a bit more roundabout. So I started as a statistician with the Pentagon and sort of got dropped into a lot of crazy sort of data problems, missing data, missing Humvees or troops or whatever it is in the Middle East. Like, hey, why is our data wrong? So a lot of crisis management at the Pentagon for the Joint Chiefs, and then got picked up and went over to the White House to work on Fukushima, yet another crisis. And then the DOJ for, we need to move to the cloud and we have all these data centers, yet again another crisis. So without sort of knowing it, I sort of kicked off a career in change management and tech. And I think what was sort of interesting about that was sort of seeing the progression as alongside my career as tech changed. I was sort of able to sort of pick these things up. It's like, okay, well, this is new, let's try this, because nothing else is working. Eventually, DOJ crisis, they were not, the crises at DOJ were too boring. So I was like, I'm gonna go to the startups, because that seems like a good idea. And then I went into cryptography, and then human capital analytics and remote work before it was cool. Then ed tech and AI, because I thought there was money there. I was totally wrong. And then I had the pleasure, of getting involved in a company doing AI and automation in healthcare 4 months before the pandemic hit. So I was like, oh, cool, another crisis. I am in the right place.
They find you.
It finds me. So burned out a little bit on healthcare, and then put my hat in the ring for this White House fellowship in innovation. So the White House started a while back, I think under Obama, a fellowship program, and I encourage anyone who's interested to look at it, where they said, hey, we're going to take late or mid to late career technologists who are really good at driving innovation in orgs outside of government, and bring them in and just pepper them through the federal government and say, hey, just shake things up, do something a little different, right? Get the ball rolling. So it's the White House Presidential Innovation Fellows Program. So they reached back out, and they reached out with NASA and said, hey, do you want to go build AI at NASA? And as an engineer, when NASA says, we want to come build AI with us, you just say yes, right? It's like, I didn't ask too many questions. I was like, oh, sure, cool. Because it was going to be an adventure. And I thought I was going to be there for a year, ended up being there for 3. NASA does that to people. So I am, wrapping up 3.5 years, almost 4 at NASA.
Wow, that's really, really incredible. So I heard something in there that I want to ask about, like finding lost Humvees. How does one look at data to find out what's going on there, for whatever you can share about? Like, because I know it's problem solving, and we will get into AI. That's sort of my next question. But you sparked my interest by saying I found lost trucks and lost military equipment.
Yeah.
Well, tell me exactly how that goes when you're staring at a data set from 7,000 miles away.
Oh, it wasn't 7,000 miles away. I was there.
Oh, no kidding.
I was in a bunker there. To be clear, it was, I would say one of the things that was sort of frustrating about government data and sort of large bureaucratic data is that the gap between sort of where you are as a statistician or someone sort of on the back end and where that data was collected and what went into that process of collection, it's huge. When I mapped it out, I think it was 126 steps between where I saw the data and where it was first ingested. That's 126 opportunities for it to fail and to be wrong, or for assumptions to get sort of baked in. And it's great when you're working sort of digital marketing, and I can imagine that you probably have similar things sort of crop up. It's like, hey, we're not seeing any traffic on this page. Maybe it's not converting as well. We need to cut it, or get rid of it, do something else. And then if looked under it, it's like, oh, well, like the link to that page in your site has been broken. Like that was the underlying reason. And if you're not asking those sorts of questions, you will miss a lot. So I think one of the things that I learned, at least on sort of data of that scale and complexity of that scale, is always challenge the assumptions that go into the data set that you're given, because what you were told about it is almost always wrong. But there's usually something buried in there that is of real value. You just, like, it's not the statistics after the fact, it's sort of like unearthing the root assumptions that went into it. That's usually the gold.
That's a fabulous takeaway, is only trust the data that you know.
Yeah.
Right? If you can't back it up and figure out which data you need and you want, that's a great lesson for any of us in what we're doing, whether it's marketing or whether it's working for the government. So you've worked on the cutting edge of government. You've been in crisis management. And this question is, it's sort of the idea is what sparked an interest in AI, and it's more, did you find AI or did AI find you?
Yeah. So also, caveat, disclaimer, my views expressed today are not the official views of NASA or the GSA or any other government agency that I will mention. I'm here in my personal capacity, quote, personal capacity, right, just clear. So AI, I think, was, I would say I found it mostly because I was trying to build a toolbox of things to solve these sort of moments of crisis. When everything's on fire and you're like, I cannot get you to perfect, but I can get you to sort of surviving, people tend to throw out a lot of rules. They're like, yeah, well, whatever you need. So in my career, I would end up sort of like, okay, well, like, we have all these tools and they didn't work because they sort of helped get us to this problem. How do we get out of it? We might have to look somewhere else. So I was looking, sort of building this toolbox through my career of all these different analytical techniques. And at the time, when I started, natural language processing, sort of now LLMs, was really still very early. I mean, we were sort of categorizing words and sentiment, and it was sort of early days of that. And it was stuff that you could do on a laptop or your own machine. You did not need $1 billion of compute, because the science just wasn't even there to make use of $1 billion of compute yet. We've clearly gone past that. But it was always one of these tools that I sort of like, took along with me in these journeys of sort of problem discovery. But one of the things that I think has been most valuable in my career is to sort of keep that curiosity of what are the new tools. If I'm not trying something new in a new project, I'm not learning. And if I'm not learning, I'm probably not going to be as prepared for the next crisis. I'm going to get stuck in the same rut of thinking that probably got the team to that crisis in the first place. I don't want to, add to that flame. I don't want to pour gasoline on the fire, as it were.
So you got to break some rules to get to the answers?
Yes.
Now, how does that work? So you're obviously a naturally very curious person, and finding these technologies and peeling back the onion. But then how do you bring your curiosity into an organization that's got sort of, and we're talking about government here, they've got rules, they've got guidelines, they've got procedures, they've got books and reams and reams and reams. I think, what did Marcus say? Reams and reams and reams and reams yesterday. How do you get through to the same people who you're trying to help when you're trying to operationalize some of your ideas?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I have seen a lot of organizations, NASA included, and I think it speaks to this culture of risk aversion, and it sort of drives to the curiosity, sort of the inverse of that. So I look at, I usually get drawn into an organization or brought in because they have a tech problem. And I get in there and I'm like, okay, cool, but not really. And they're like, oh yeah, but please solve our tech. I'm like, yeah, I'll do that. But I need to talk to your HR person first, right? Let me talk to your process manager. Okay, we're hiring the wrong people. They're like, what does that have to do? It's like, because if we don't solve that problem, even if we fix the tech, in 6 months, there'll be a new problem. Because you haven't hired the right people to avoid. You keep hiring arsonists, and then you hire me to put out fires. So there is some culture change there, and I think I have learned as my career progressed that culture is usually the root cause of a lot of these big problems when they get to that sort of scale. And I sort of think back to NASA, and I look at it's a great professor of mine once said, it's like culture is reflected by what you put on the walls. And at NASA we have pieces of like photos of major events, but there are also NASA centers with elements of crashes and exploded shuttles where lives were lost. So they take safety very, very, very seriously. So much so that when you go into a gift shop, which I think is also a pretty good reflection of a culture, is like what they sell in their gift shop, they have little keychains that say failure is not an option, which I think is hilarious. And I think it's hilarious because no one at NASA ever said that. That is a quote from Ed Helms in the movie Apollo 13. So another way to think about culture is it is not history, it is the story you tell yourself about your history. So they have adopted that framing from the movie to sort of rewrite their own history of like, that's how deeply ingrained it is that it's not even actually what they did. Because I think the Apollo missions were actually pretty risk-seeking, right? They were sort of cowboys to some extent. But that's not the culture today. So when you're trying to drive innovation in a culture that is so risk-averse, you have to really think strategically about, again, sort of the people that you get involved, but also know that like there are just going to be walls, put up. One of the sort of examples that I sort of talk about typically is sort of when I was building the first AI sort of tool. I think when GPT-3 came out, I was like, this is going to be big. And I was on Twitter, one of those early followers, and I was like, oh, I want to get my hands on this because this is cheap and it's really good. I think I submitted the waiver, like security waiver, to get it into my like that evening. I was probably the first or second person at NASA broadly to get access to this. And it's like they don't know what I'm doing yet, so just ask before they've realized what I've done. But I got that permission, and then I started building it. It took 2 weeks to build the first prototype on ChatGPT. It took 9 months to get approval for the cloud sandbox to deploy it. Wow. And that is an insane inversion of like reward versus risk versus like effort. And I sort of keep thinking about that. And that experience was like, okay, this is what I expected in government because I'd been in government before. So I had to have like an out. I had to have another way. And the approach that I typically say is that it's hard to get funding, it's hard to get budget, it's hard to get approval. So I try to build coalitions of the willing. I just build a prototype, a tiny thing, and I just put it in front of people that I think are curious. And they get excited. And they're like, oh yeah, I'll help. And the people who are really good in your orgs at like driving that curiosity, that want to drive new and interesting things and change, they will find you if you put yourself out there. And eventually, if you build a team of 5 or 6, you start to build a little value, and then you can take it to leadership and say, hey, like we're doing good stuff. There's a there, and then suddenly you get a little money, and you can snowball that way. But it is typically, I think, it's a bottoms-up approach of like coalitions of the willing, and that really is also a good way to sort of signal, hey, I'm trying to do something that's maybe different than our existing culture, and if you think that's a new culture that you want to be part of, come join us. Right? And it's that outward signal of culture change that you're really promoting, and that gets you interest. Because you don't want to, like, oh, that's a cool project, but I'm going to come in and be a naysayer. I'm going to, crap on it all day. You want someone who's like, oh, I'm going to yes and. My wife's an actress.
Improv.
Oh yeah, my wife's an actress, so there's a lot of yes and references in our house.
I like it.
So yeah.
So it's really interesting to hear about this, and there's a concept that I'm familiar with too. You talk about the coalition of the willing. I've studied bottom line change, which is if you've got an idea, you need to bring in a few people, and ultimately 1 or 2 of those people should be your skeptics, because if you can flip a skeptic, get them to 51% means they're all in. Now you can bring them along, and they're going to tell people that it's a good thing. Now, thinking about talking to the other departments that you've spoken of, Obviously, you've run into some walls, and you probably hit your head on a few of them.
Yes.
How do you sort of break through those, and have you been stopped in some of these efforts? Because right now it feels like, oh, it's been smooth sailing. I built some ChatGPT, and then we went to do this thing, and hey, well, the 9 months of bureaucracy to get something implemented in a sandbox is obvious. So tell me about the walls that you run into there, and how we as marketers, but how we can address some of those things in our organizations, and what sort of negotiations you went through to get the right people on your side to bring this to life.
Yeah, so I think I should probably explain a little bit of sort of the group that I work with inside NASA, because I think we are even weird within sort of the weirdness of NASA. So the best way to explain it quickly is, who here has seen a sci-fi movie where like there's some like chaotic thing that happens, climate change, or like the movie The Core? It's like, oh, the molten core of the Earth has stopped spinning, and we're going to fix it with nukes. But note that they're like, oh, but like, how do we get the nukes there? It's like, oh, there's always a team from NASA. It's like some guy in a warehouse or in a basement who's like, oh, we actually have a guy who's been working on this, right? Like, who's seen that movie, right? Or any movie of that, right? It is a trope within sci-fi. So that does sort of exist within NASA. There are teams working on the sort of the weird stuff, even within the weird stuff of NASA. There's like not the basement dwellers, I think is a little mean, but they're the relatively underfunded groups. But there are those teams who are like, hey, like we're building a prototype of something that if you solve this, if you crack this, it will be like, yeah, it's 99% likely to fail, but if you crack it, it will change humanity. And one of the things that I think was sort of cool to get to work on sort of this group was that, well, they were struggling with this idea of that culture of sort of failure is not an option. It's like, well, you cannot have failure is not an option and then also be swinging for the fences at like a 99% failure rate is your goal. And that, like, they were having sort of that struggle of culture change. So when I joined, the first thing I had to sort of do, again, I had this conversation with this project leader. It was like, hey, yeah, like you're not failing enough. And we need to, like, I'm gonna talk to you about HR. And he's like, but you're the AI guy. I was like, I know, I'm gonna talk to you about HR. And he was, I think, the first skeptic, but I sort of walked him through like that. I went through the listening tour, like walked him through, here are the processes and the programs, and you have these brilliant people who wanna do things and they can't seem to get the projects done. So it's not that you don't have the ideas, it's that something about how you validate and how they are assembled and how they are proved, that's what's breaking down. So let's rethink this structure. And once I got him on board, we started producing more failures. And that was actually a good thing. And part of that was like, hey, you were looking at 10 ideas a year. Okay, that's actually not enough. Because if you pick 3 ideas to fund and you have 10, that means you have a sort of a failure rate of 70%, but it also means your threshold for a good idea is 30%, top 30%. And I was like, I want to aim for 1,000 ideas. And that was like a sort of an accountability change. It's like, oh, don't think of it as how many ideas we want to succeed. We still only want to fund 3 ideas. I'm not asking for any more money. I want to prove 997 ideas wrong. Yeah. That is a very different framing. And I think that worked really well within the structure of the organization. Because again, I'm not asking for more funding. I'm asking for a pace of change, and I'm asking for us to like ring the bell on our failures as a success. Look how many ideas that we tried and we looked at and said, that didn't work. I can prove that didn't work, because if your process threshold has to get you from a 30% threshold to a 0.3% threshold, the process will look a lot different, right? You're gonna ask different questions. You're gonna dig a lot deeper. And I think from like a experimentation phase, and you're thinking like, oh, like we're trying all these new marketing ideas. We are facing the change in AI in our ecosystem. We don't know what's gonna work. If you are struggling and you're feeling that in your orgs, I would say don't worry so much about having more good ideas. Struggle first with having more bad ideas. Get in the habit of having a lot more bad ideas, and then over the process of sort of filtering them down, you will get really good at identifying what was a good idea. What is the filter, that pass filter that gets you to that 0.3%? And then the rigor by which you approach those ideas, the data that you will have to fix or find, whatever it is, will get better and better over time. And then eventually you'll know a lot better what a good idea is. And I think like that is sort of the mechanism we took at NASA. Once we sort of started proving and waving the flag of, look how many ideas we've thrown away, because we're really good. The ideas that we came up with at the end were rock solid, right? Some of the ideas that like you might have seen in the news, right? California wildfires were going out there. We needed to, the group that we're working in within NASA, sort of the weird kids, we were in sort of focused on, my group was aviation. So there's space, there's science, and there's like forgotten stepchild of aviation. We do planes too. But like, you think of all the things that you experience as a person out in the world, you are not going to space. You are not on a satellite taking satellite images, right? You were probably flying though. You probably flew to get here, right? You might be buying your kids or yourselves a drone. Those are the things that the aviation part of NASA is dealing with. So we were focusing on things that were much more sort of human, a lot more sort of, dealing today. So we could see that value sort of transferred into NASA very quickly. Our swinging for the fences ideas of, hey, it would be great if we had a really robust drone that could fly over these California wildfires and deal with the heat of these massive heat columns and not melt, so that I could find where the fire is spreading and find missing firemen lost in the fog, lost in smoke, but could operate without GPS or without satellite, because the heat is messing with the satellite connections, and the fire has burned down all the cell towers. So GPS is basically lost unless you have some military-grade satellite. So how do you deploy that system at scale? That was a really cool problem that we solved, and it came out of that sort of process of like filtering out what is the most valuable thing today. We were able to deploy that, and that's something we built that is being used today. And that, I think, is, again, you have those sorts of wins, then you can take that win and say, hey, look, this was a weird idea that no one thought was going to work, but look at it now. You gotta give us a little bit more breathing room. And you can't sell them answers, because when you start, you don't know the answer. You have to sell them the opportunities. You sell them like the proof of how many things you're going to prove are wrong. Proof in the failure, right? And that's sort of the way that we started to shift broader NASA culture.
You've self-identified yourself as a disruptor just through our conversation thus far. And what I heard in that is that, and NASA, right? Life is on the line if you fail, right?
Yep.
So it's like fail now so you don't fail later is really sort of obvious. Mm-hmm. But in a culture that's so ingrained in being risk averse, and it's so funny to think risk averse when you're sending people to the moon. I get the risk aversion, but we're taking huge risk in sending people to space. And when thinking about that and breaking down the culture, when do you decide an idea isn't worth it anymore? What's that inflection point? Or do you you try to be objective at the start when you're, obviously, it's like Google has what they call moonshots, right?
Yep.
And there's a farm of crazy idea people that say, let's go build stuff and we're going to fail a lot.
Yeah.
When do you know it's not right? When do you know to throw it away at NASA?
So we talk a lot about DARPA and Google X, and they're like, they're moonshot factories. We can't use the term moonshot factory because we actually have a moonshot factory. So we're like, we're a wicked problem solver, right? We need marketing help. That's what we need. But I would say that one of the sort of philosophical changes, and particularly in the era of AI, was it's like there's no such thing as actually a bad idea, and like that's not like a camp counselor thing of like, all ideas are good. It's welcome to kindergarten. It's your first day. No, what we sort of like the entropy of an idea, the fact that a human, some neurons fired and said, hey, maybe this, that is of value, even if it is a total failure. I want that. I want to capture it. I want to sort of pull that out because. You're a PhD. You have so much institutional knowledge of this vast field. You're at the top of your field, and you had that sort of brain spark. It may sound crazy. I want it. And once we said, hey, I'm going to capture all the ideas, and we're going to start celebrating the weirdest ideas. And every bad idea might just be an idea that needs to be combined with something else later, or it's an idea that hasn't quite hit its time yet, or that's going to be a problem, but let's wait till we see a few more market signals that that's actually going to be a real issue in 20 years. Let's start researching it now. So that was really sort of the shift of all ideas are good. We want to capture them all, but not everything gets funded today, and that's okay. And like that shift also again sort of freed again sort of that sense of risk and failure of the team with like ideation session. We had sort of wicked wild days where like we invite all of NASA onto like a massive Zoom call on like one Miro board, and we go through, it's like, hey, we're gonna like, let's imagine that like, like something crazy happens, some foreign country releases tries to do some geoengineering, and they put some chemical in the clouds, and it has a massive algae kill-off, or phytoplankton kill-off in the ocean until all fish die. What do you do? And you get like 500 PhDs across a whole bunch of fields to ideate and brainstorm. You're going to come up with some weird ideas, a lot of very straightforward ideas, but you want to get them into the weird. We would give an award out for the weirdest idea. And if you like win the weirdest idea award at NASA, like that's something you want to put on your resume. I like that sort of stuff. It was like, again, it was a way to change the culture that changed the conversation of what we celebrated and what was success looked like. That then started to sort of spread out within NASA, which was very powerful when we started doing it.
When you're working with these people, are these people on your team, on different teams? I mean, you obviously cross bridges into other teams, and we've all faced, in our careers, we've faced the not invented here problem, where you show up with what you believe might be a good idea, and it just sits on a desk or it's moved to the side, filed in the circular, as they say.
Yeah.
How do you combat that in an organization such as NASA? And I sort of want to bring ego into the conversation, and I imagine them, because given the scientists that you have working at NASA and some of the big brains at NASA, that there might be a little bit of ego involved in some of what you're doing.
Yes. So one of the things we had to sort of adjust was, again, so it goes back to that HR strategy that I pitched, was sort of I would rather have a team of 3 of very excited, like correctly motivated people than a team of 50 that are mostly naysayers. And that was like a hard thing to sort of hear. But the way that I described it is like, I think it was sort of is helmet syndrome. I promise it'll make sense. Go with me on this journey. So you're meeting these PhDs. These are scientists at the top of their field. They are like, oh, I'm the department director of this of chemistry for this sort of thing at NASA. They are the world leader, right? And they might have been doing something a certain way for 20 years. And at this point, right, that way is effective, like they hit the wall, right? And they are banging their head on that wall, trying to break through over and over and over again. And now you are pitching to them as like, hey, we could, hey, I've got this AI or I've got this new idea, like we just go around it. Like the wall doesn't matter anymore, let's just go around it. And they're like, no, you don't understand. This is my wall. See that little dent? That's the dent I've been making with my head. I've got a special helmet that I've been designing to protect me when I make this dent. Like I can go like 60 miles an hour at this wall with this helmet. It keeps me safe. And I'm like, great, cool, but we don't need the helmet. We don't need the wall. Let's just go around. They're like, and you're talking just past each other because they want to tell you about how cool their helmet is at hitting their head on the wall, and you want to just like move on to the next problem. So like there is a lot of not necessarily ego. I think it is dedication and excitement with that problem, right? Because they're committed to that problem. But what that means is when you get those people into a room to start trying to ideate and brainstorm, they're like, hey, we're doing something, and we're bringing in we're doing something vaguely related to commercial aircraft. So let's bring in a wing guy. Let's bring in an FAA guy. Let's bring in a fuel guy. And the fuel guy's in the room. He's like, great, I'm here to talk about fuel. If you're not talking about fuel, I'm just going to be on my phone. That is not really great for ideation. So we had to sort of flip that narrative. It's like, okay, you can be on this team, but you gotta apply for it. You gotta work for it. Like, we're not just gonna take someone on the bench at NASA whose project has lost funding. No. You gotta want to join this. And we would let anyone join. It's like, we will eventually need a fuel person, but they're just gonna answer a few questions about fuel. I don't need them for the whole process. I would much rather have someone really curious. So like, hey, that marketing person over there in like the NASA comms team, they can participate in the scientific discussion. We even got a contractor to sort of help us bring in sort of the weird people that NASA didn't know how to typically hire. It's like, great, we're gonna bring in a social scientist. We're gonna bring in a sci-fi writer. We got a guy who wrote like sci-fi short stories, and he was great. He's like, he would just constantly come up with super weird ideas and ask really good questions. And it's like, yes. And like we're suddenly having conversations about like the ethics of like the Warhammer 40K universe. I was like, I don't know where this is going, but I'm really excited to be a part of this and to have my AI just like taking notes and just like, all right, where does this go? I don't know. Awesome. And like that sort of change in culture of like, yes, you can come to this conversation, but you have to leave your expertise at the door, not just your ego, but your expertise at the door. You're only allowed to answer questions or bring up ideas and things you've never worked in, because we're all going to be a little naive on this. But that is the right way to start this conversation. And eventually, actually, I can answer that question. We are on the fuel topic. Great, cool. You got to earn the right to talk about your PhD field by being weird enough to like survive the first few rounds of like really deep, crazy ideation.
So tell me something. So AI is part of your job title.
Yes.
Was AI always part of your job title? Was it part of the job description, or because of your embracing of AI and what you did to shift the culture, did AI get added to your job title?
No. So I mean, the job title was sort of, that head of digital innovation was sort of an invented title. Like the title is like, in government titles, right? So like information specialist level, blah, 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 blah. And then they're like, oh, you're a White House Presidential Innovation Fellow. And they're like, yeah, but what do you do? I was like, okay, head of digital innovation AI for convergent aeronautic solutions. Yeah. So the AI was always part of the job description. And certainly like a key descriptor. But when I joined, it was just prior to this current AI revolution. So I was expecting to come in and have to use sort of legacy, and it's 5 years old, legacy AI, to do a lot of this work. And the job was, or the theory was, can we get, we're doing all this crazy ideation, but we are still struggling to get to that 1,000 ideas. Maybe we can get to 100, from 10 to 100 with our human process. We can't get to 1,000. AI might get us there. And AI might help us sort of sort and sift through all of this information, right? Because we aren't trying to solve like the things that Lockheed or Boeing is going to solve next year or 5 years. We don't care about that. They're cool. We don't care about the things that are near term. We care about solving problems that are 20 to 50 years away, but are so big that you need to start solving them now to have a hope of solving them in 50 years, right? To actually have sort of completed it in 50 years. Big, crazy ideas. So we're looking at anything and everything. So the scope of this AI search and this AI sort of data category was any problem humanity might face in the next 10 to 50 years. Go. Okay, cool. So like,
it's a pretty big crystal ball.
Right. So like my wife would ask like, what are you working on? I was like, I don't know. Like I honestly don't. And 29 days out of 30, you are mostly get like down rabbit holes of like, oh, this is a way that humanity is going to end. But then there's that 30th day where you're like, oh, but wait, this and this and this might come together, and we could actually solve that. Oh, that's a doable thing. We could crack that nut. That's really cool. So fighting for those things. But we wanted this like, well, can we do this at scale? So that became sort of like we wanted this AI to help us traverse this massive amount of data that was out there. Every weak signal in the market, what investors were investing in, what they weren't investing in, what they were leaving at the table, anything and everything. That's a lot of data, and sort of a terrifying problem. GPT then gets announced and launched. And I was like, oh, okay. I have $1 billion LLM that I can rent for, sort of
$20 a month.
Yeah, cents per request. This is crazy. Okay, I can definitely leverage this. And it really started to like move us past the data collection with AI to the data sifting and sorting and ranking with AI. Oh, help us pick, evaluate those 997. To then like finally, what are the things like we sort of reach the limits of human cognition. Some of these problems are so complex, like you could get 5 PhDs in a room and it will take them a full lifetime to understand each other, to even start the conversation about solving this problem. You think about like, how do we solve climate change, right? And there's little bits and pieces, but you're thinking like, no, like really like solve it so we don't ever have this problem again in humanity. Like that's a big juicy problem. Many PhDs, dissertations, lots of fields have been written about that. But that was sort of the scale that we were dealing with. So we started to look at, well, what are the problems that we as humans are biased towards looking at? What are we not looking at because it's maybe even too scary for us? Where is the white space between what is known in this AI, like what the AI has and what we are finding? And that was the really cool thing of like where we sort of really started to like, I think hit pay dirt, as it were, was we sort of to bend the AI to start looking for gaps in information, gaps in the research, things that no one was talking about, but we should be talking about, and draw those like lines and connections and predict those futures. And that was like the really cool component of AI. I like to think of it as like, the nice way to put it is like we're trying to induce AI into not hallucinating, but dreaming. Can you get AI to dream? But of course, again, 29 days out of 30, it's a dystopian, terrible future. So it was more like giving AI nightmares and then hoping that one day you have a really nice dream. But yes, a lot of AI nightmares. Poor AI. But it was a big part of the job initial, and it became just a huge part of sort of how we think about ideation and these futurism, because why not use AI to better collaborate? Why not help AI translate and get those 5 PhDs in that room to sort of move faster and come up with better ideas and leverage their expertise at a scale that we just couldn't imagine before?
So you talk about collaboration in AI, and anytime I think about collaborating, I think about collaborating on spreadsheets or documents or presentations, right?
Yeah.
That this is how we generally collaborate. Tell us how you collaborate using AI. We all work in organizations with many people. How do you get people to collaborate in AI? How does that work?
So I think part of that challenge is that, think back sort of like a lot of the collaboration tools that we'll call it 10, 15 years ago from like largely a software as a service and software sector, they were sort of, someone digitized a paper process. And even sort of like we think about like, oh, digital whiteboards. The term is literally describing a physical thing in a room, but now it's digital. So we're sort of stuck with those tools because that is the user experience, the mechanism of collaboration that humans are used to, that are comfortable with. I don't know if we've quite, as a society, even figured out like what that next form of collaboration is, but we have Zoom meetings, we have like someone taking notes, now AI taking notes, we have a digital whiteboard, we're capturing ideas. The thing that I cared about is like, great, pick any one of those human ideas. Reduce the friction for the humans to put as many ideas on there as possible. But I wanted something that could be live and collaboratively edited, so everyone's working from the same space. I don't want to have to email things around. And I want something that is API accessible, so the AI can go in and make comments and add things and edit. And like that was sort of table stakes for us. Because like I can make the AI meet where the humans are. It's a lot harder to change the whole paradigm of human collaboration. So okay, start there. But one of the things that I sort of also insisted was let these documents sort of build. Don't delete things, just add, just keep adding. Leave traces of the things the assumptions you made, and they're like, oh yeah, and then, oh, that was wrong. I want the assumption, and then I want how you figured out was wrong, and then your next idea. Don't delete it, don't edit the document to sort of delete things, just keep adding. Because AI, with that additional context, can be much, much more valuable. Because now it's not just going to tell you, oh yeah, these are the things you would likely understand or get to the end, because sometimes it'll be wrong. It will actually walk you through as an org, here's the things you probably would have, like what you would have started with, and the mistakes you would have made. Or, oh, your team keeps making this mistake and keeps making this assumption, and then you find out later that it's wrong. So like, let's maybe get ahead of that. Or it offers that as a suggestion up front. Hey, go find this out first before you waste 4 weeks getting to this assumption that you eventually prove wrong. So like having AI have that additional context can be much more valuable. It is like a very good research assistant if you give it a lot of context. But you should give it a lot of context. And that means adapting your collaboration processes to leave a lot more breadcrumbs behind. Don't pick them up, don't eat them. Don't make the Hansel and Gretel mistake. Like you want to leave all of the evidence behind for not only the team that might come behind you. It's proof of those failures. It's proof that you did the work, right? It's like, oh, I spent 8 months and I finally got to one idea. It's like, no, I spent 8 months and I got to 99 ideas and I proved them all wrong to get to this 100th. That is valuable, but it's also valuable to your leadership and to the AI. So like, why not?
Does anybody, so thinking about failing so much in terms of generating so many ideas, is there ever a spot where you sort of get a side eye with saying, hey, you guys are really failing a lot. Can we get an idea to win here?
Yes. One of my colleagues described it as like, we need brownies along the way. It's like leadership does not like failure. Failure is not an option, James. You can't talk about how many times they fail. It's like, okay, what can I talk about? It's like, we need brownies. It's like, I don't know what a brownie is. It's like, what do you mean? Am I physically bringing them brownies? I've got some recipes. You ask an AI, hey, I need brownies. It will give you recipes. It will not give you sort of like shortcuts. And then the conversation becomes around, oh, quick wins. And I was like, I don't even like that as an idea, because then you are surrendering the long-term 50-year goal for the short-term goal. And I would think it's more as like, what I want is more of a, described as like a simple win. I want something that proves something along the journey. So you can design this like, hey, I want a couple failures before we have some sort of validation win, right? And you could frame we proved this wrong as a win. It removes one of those branches, but I would say that you have to have some of those simple wins along those journeys, because you are designing something that needs political and legal and ethical and social staying power, not just technical staying power. But assume that like the teams that you're working on these projects might exist. This project needs to survive, be validated, and avoid funding cuts for 30 years. And like people talk about like James Webb Space Telescope, again, not my department of NASA, but I think it's worth talking about. When they launched it, right, it had 364 single points of failure, and all of them had to succeed. So you do the numbers on that, like the likelihood of any one of those components failing, I think it was like 6 nines. Every single one of those components had to pass at a 6 nines level SLA, sort of like it can only fail like once in every million opportunities, sort of crazy level precision, every single one of them. And all of those components were probably built by a different team. And they're all on that's cool. But now imagine, they're like, oh, they're on a 30-year journey. When they asked Congress for money for this, they underbid. They're like, yeah, we know. Day one, we're already lying about how much this is going to cost. We're just not telling Congress, like, yeah, we need this much. And like, they knew that from the start that it was going to cost more. But they knew that that was what's going to get the political football moving, and then there's going to be some momentum. And they played that political game for 30 years on a project that had massive, big, terrible failures. There was one, it was like a $900 million failure where they shook the satellite to like make sure it would withstand the launch, and bolts started just like flying off of it. Wow. And you're like, oh God, like okay, where'd they go? Where'd they come from? Oh, we don't know. We have to take it apart and put it all back together again, figure out where the bolts went. But also, we should probably find a different bolt vendor. Just saying. So that was like a test that we needed to do, and it revealed a $900 million problem. But at that point, like, all right, yeah, we're going to spend the $900 million. But to keep it politically alive for that long, that's real skill. And I think you should think about the political life of these projects, about the people who come after you, and like if you really want to make these changes, you should be thinking about like what the ecosystem looks like. If you build these AI tools, for example, I talk a lot about what the AI, assume that your funding for your team gets cut, and the people coming behind you may not be as qualified or as good at this. They were not as versed in the world pre-AI, in the sort of traditional digital marketing. So they won't know the trade-offs that you had to make. So you have to sort of leave the breadcrumbs for them, leave that documentation behind so that you can sort of survive the political length to like get to the end of these big projects. But again, James Webb Space Telescope, 364 points of failure, all of them succeeded, 30 years, way over budget, way over timeline, but probably one of the greatest scientific achievements of humanity. We are looking at light that is effectively from like the Big Bang. At think of it as like the precision of that satellite. It's looking at a match, like a single match lit on the surface of the moon from Earth. That is the precision, like 1 photon per minute sort of precision. That is an insane amount. We had to invent physics and cooling systems whole areas of physics and cooling that did not exist when we started the project. Like, yeah, we'll figure it out eventually. Like that sort of work has to be done by someone. But they were clearly thinking about that politics and the culture and how, again, this survives these like long-term changes.
So outside of the failures that you're seeking in AI, what are some of the key learnings or mistakes that you've made along the way? Like, because we talk about hallucinations, AI hallucinates. We've heard it, 15, 20 times in the last 24 hours.
Yeah.
So obviously it hallucinates, and obviously there's going to be mistakes made. Give me a pitfall or something else where you said, oops, we didn't intend to do that.
Yeah.
And I know that's a failure, but you're like, it's that wake-up call and the learning that comes from it.
I think even in NASA, there was a big concern about hallucinations, of like, oh, what if it lies to us? And I had to do a little bit of internal marketing around the idea of hallucinations. It's like, oh, no, we want them. That's good. We want weird ideas. We want it to be wrong because these things haven't happened. So that was a bit of rebranding, but I think there's a risk that you have to just acknowledge. If you were asking for factual things, the AI is going to be probably wrong. If you are asking it to come up with potential ideas that you need to then go and validate, and you can even have an AI then go and validate them. Hey, just like go find the source and I'm going to click on it. Yep, okay, that's right. You can do that, but don't ask it to sort of wholesale invent facts and like trust. Ask it to go find things, to go search for things, to come back with suggestions for things. Think of the process of like you want it to be a partner in that ideation, because like think of like Grammarly or spell check, right? It used to be like humans write the thing and AI does the error checking. Now we're getting to like AI writes the thing, humans need to do the error checking, but you have to leave the error checking in there, and it has to be human. And this is where we talk about sort of like what the future of like early careers look like. If you had to sort of if you were trying to hire someone, like, oh, like what does an early dev job or a marketing job look like? It used to be, oh, I'd do all of this grunt work to learn how to write it well so that I could identify the errors, so that I could then error check the next generation. Well, if AI is doing that, what does like that early career path look like? And I would say, again, sort of stepping those people up, they need to quickly get to you're validating and error checking. That is the skill that you need to develop day one. because the AI is probably going to write a lot of stuff better than you, but you need to be good enough to tell when the AI is not good. And that may only be 10% of the time, 5% of the time. But that is the skill that your sort of early career people should really start developing, and they can. It's not impossible, but it is a shift in sort of the way the world is working.
You talk about skill and what we should develop. Let's spin it back to marketing a little bit and talk about people who might be reluctant to start or played around with it or skeptical. How do we begin to start leveraging AI or our organizations? You talked some about collaboration, but what do we do and how do we go about building some of this stuff?
I mean, if you aren't using AI, I'm sorry, you are going to get destroyed. If my job is partially using AI to imagine the futures, and I understand both AI and like a lot of futurism, the world is moving very fast. And I would say that you could look back for an example. When I just do more traditional keynotes, I don't talk about the future. I talk about the past. I go through history, and it's like, hey, here are all these weird examples from history that basically the exact same thing happened. Now let's look at what's happening in AI. Like, there's a lesson to be learned here, right? History doesn't repeat, it rhymes. A lot of rhymes. Social media management didn't really exist in 2006, 20 years ago, right? Yeah. The era of millennials graduating from college, entering in a terrible job market, and like, oh, here's this thing, Facebook, or like, hey, like all of our jobs are missing. These were my friends, like, let's invent this whole thing called social media management, and that became part of brand, and it became now a huge component of marketing. It didn't exist 20 years ago. But I think we could probably say that the where we are in sort of that S-curve of innovation is like, we've probably diminishing returns on innovation in social media at this point. The innovation is coming from AI. So we are probably as orgs, as marketing people, right? You're probably gonna transition from that social media S-curve to something that's more AI core as that innovation S-curve. And we're in the early days of that. What does it look like? I don't know. But to pretend that you are not at the sort of diminishing return level on the S-curve of social media is sort of silly, right? It's been 20 years, we're doing stuff. What is even new in social media is being largely driven by AI. And what we're talking about, sort of that sort of where the sort of career looks like, you should be thinking about how am I integrating AI into the traditional old mechanisms, but also how am I rethinking what AI is going to change in the user experience of people who like participate in my brand, who know my brand. The example I was giving a lot of thought to this before coming because I don't typically do a lot of marketing work, and I was thinking, like, what are brands that are just top of mind to me? And I kept coming back to, I don't know if Liberty Mutual is in the room, but I've been binging a lot of, I think it's Prime, and I see, gosh darn, so many Liberty Mutual commercials on repeat. And they're memorable. Like the Liberty Bibberty guy, he gets me every time. It really works. And like the emu, like, the old farmer is saying, like, you'll never make it, and saving people car insurance. Absurd idea, but it is sticky. It works. But that being said, that is a brand that is very top of mind for me. I get advertised a lot, and I recently moved and how it was changing a lot of like my insurance. And I was like, hey, it's every 5 years. I'm finally buying insurance. The first thing I did is I went to AI, and Liberty Mutual did not come up. And I was like, okay, cool. I trust the AI's perusal of all these various sources. I asked a few questions. Like, great, that recommendation. And I think it's not only sort of trying to get your brand like to be accessible, like generative or AI engine optimization, GEO, whatever the term is. I don't think we've even decided what the term is yet. But like no. That is going to be real. But you also have to imagine like even sort of like what does that do from a trust perspective in the brand, the exposure level? Like if you're not in there and the cutoff is like great, it's only going to show 5. It's not you can't like being on. It's not Google first 10. It's the first 5. It's the first 3. And you can update your SEO. You can change that. I don't know if the models will update very quickly because inherent and baked into that model is, if your brand's been around a long, some sort of reputation of that brand. Oh, you had a big incident 10 years ago, 5 years ago. That's going to be in there because these data companies they are starving for more data. And the likelihood of them being, oh yeah, we'll just delete that. Oh, well, we don't care that happened to your company 5 years ago. It's been 5 years. That's going to be there. So like the nature of your reputation as a brand and how you engage and what that user experience is going to change pretty dramatically. And yes, being like available to these AI models to search, But I don't think even sort of the companies building these models have really decided what that looks like. So there's a level of like being nimble in this current ecosystem that you need to drive for. And I think part of that for your organization is not necessarily failure, but like just start trying. Try stuff with AI. Get it out there. Even if you fail, the success you should be really aiming for is how many people in my company are comfortable enough with AI to know where it is bad. If they're using it and they're like, yeah, it's good at this and not good at that, great, you are ready. That's it. That's the level that your whole workforce basically needs to be at. To just have enough awareness that they know where to use it and where it's going to fail and where they need to fix it. And if you get to there, you will be in a good place moving forward, because I can't tell you like, oh, you need to focus on this tech or that tech, because I don't know. But if you have a team that is looking and trying and always trying to figure out like where it sort of breaks down, you will be at that cutting edge, because you'll know what it's bad at. And then you can sort of adjust your resources accordingly.
This level of disruption in technology is something we haven't seen before, right? The ground is shifting beneath us on a daily basis, right? Something new tool, this AI, that AI, pick your AI, pick an AI tool built on this, built on that. How do you coach teams to sort of see through, it's kind of a fog, right? Of
Yes.
all of this coming at us. How do you coach teams and humans to sort of see through that, to stay in the zone of really problem solving and identifying the right tools to solve the problems?
I would like to say it's a lot like surfing, but I've never surfed, so I was like, it seems conceptually a lot like surfing, just like ride the wave. The way that I had this problem at NASA, because there's just so much coming out, and by the time I built my first prototype at NASA and got it approved to build, the tech was already out of date. So when we went to build like the second version, like, oh, like let's scale it, I was like, no, I have to rebuild it first. Sorry, hold on. Totally new tech stack. And that was like months. It was just like a couple months had passed. So we're still in that space. And I think for the first time in a long time, software developers and their curiosity are actually driving the ecosystem of change here. It's not actually brand uptake. It's software development uptake. Because people can build products faster than customers can experience them and give you feedback on them. And that is a total shift, right? It used to be, it took 10 developers for every like one product manager and one designer. That ratio now I think is more like 2 to 1. Because an AI-enabled developer can build things very quickly. 5-ish, I don't know about 10x, but 5 times faster. So now you have people just building and building and building and building. I tend to look at it as like, okay, well, I don't want to try things that just come out because there's so much coming up. I try to look for things like, not for a market emergent like company, but a market emergence. What is a new field of products that is coming out? Oh, there's 2, there's 3, there's 4 companies trying to do that. Now I'm going to pay attention to that product space. Because if there's 3 or 4 companies trying to getting enough traction, they got a little bit of funding, okay, great. Like there's probably a there. One company is not a signal. One tech product, not a signal. At this point, whole emergent new fields of products that use and leverage AI, a whole new customer experience that leverages AI, like that is indicative. From the sort of deep technical side, I would not invest, and my team did not invest in any technical solution that like OpenAI or Google or anybody offered until at least one other major provider offered it. I want to be just like, not like first bleeding edge, I want to be just like one generation behind that. I want to know when 2 have adopted that. Because then it's probably going to stick around and I can make some technical investments and sort of strategize around it. Because there are a lot of things that first generation, oh God bless them, there are so many startups. GPT-3 comes out, so many startups got funding. And then 3 months later, OpenAI came out and they're like, hey, we've launched all these products. And it was like they just offered out of the box like solutions that so many startups had like built their whole model on, and woof, they all disappeared overnight, along with all that investor money. So I think investors got a little bit smarter after that first wave, that first culling. But you need to be thoughtful about that as well, because you want to be moving fast. You can't be left behind, but you can't be swinging at every ball. So wait for the products to have at least one other competitor is basically sort of the rule of thumb. It's like look for at least one other legitimate competitor that has raised money and has actual traction, like real customers. And that, I think, is a good threshold.
So without giving away state secrets, are there emerging technologies, talk about 3 or 4, what excites you? Are there certain technologies that you can share with us that you're excited about in this field of AI, what you see in emerging technology? So
the 2 things that I think, on more so the commercial side, So one of the things I think is their AR and VR is coming at some point. It is a terrible user experience because the headsets are heavy. And the things, again, like the market signals that I look for is like, okay, but like, when do like fashion brands or like gaming companies where like this would be like cool, like when are they starting involved? Ray-Ban partnered with Facebook, and then Louis Vuitton partnered with like League of Legends gaming. I was like, oh, okay, so like gamers are gonna drive that tech because AR and VR and gaming are like a marriage made. They just don't know yet. Maybe they do. They're engaged, not at the altar yet. But now they've got major brands, fashion labels that are going to push consumer experience out there. Okay, it's like, so that is coming. But the user experience, still very heavy headsets. Once you couple AI, like a really useful AI into that experience, it will be a game changer. We're just not quite there from a comfort and a price point yet. The other sort of half of that is like, what are the other things that, like, let me ask this question to the audience. Like, who here has an iPhone? Right? I have an iPhone. Who here loves Siri? Yeah, that's what I thought.
One hand in the
One
back.
hand, cool. Who here has ever owned like an Amazon Alexa? Who here just feels like the Alexa really like changed their life? Yeah, right, a couple people. Who here, right, has fiddled with ChatGPT and is like, oh man, this is sort of life-changing. It's changed the way I work, right? Right. So something about GPT and this era of LLMs has crossed the user experience threshold of quality. People like it. Something that didn't quite really happen with Siri or Amazon Alexa. So one of the areas that I think is like, I fully expect Christmas 2026 would be my guess. Maybe Christmas 2027 or like a just after Christmas, I don't know, like Labor Day sale or something. There's gonna be some marketing event, right, where those brands relaunch the home experience that is like this generation LLM enabled. And if they open that market up to be like, hey, we don't want to be in the hardware game, we want to be in the software game, like all bets are off. Because that changes just like the nature of the home experience, how you shop, how your kids do homework. Everything will start to change, and that will be for everyday consumers. Like I was like, I plopped the Amazon Alexa down. I was like, hey, homework mode, right? And like it, works with my kid to do homework. He's 3. He's probably not gonna be doing homework anytime soon. But by the time he's doing homework, it will be the nature of that, right? It was like, hey, we're not gonna give you the answer. We're gonna ask you thought-provoking questions to get you there. And it like works with my kid. And then maybe I'm there learning too, alongside like, I don't remember how to do long division. Let's do this. Funky new long division ways, right? Common Core, whatever they came up with.
Yeah.
So like that is going to be a future experience. I have been trying to like jerry-rig my Amazon Alexa to just like update my shopping list. It's like, hey, I'm in the kitchen. I see something missing. Hey, Alexa, add this to my shopping list. God help me, it cannot do it. It is so annoying, right? And I'm a technologist. I do this stuff for a living, and I'm still having trouble like making these APIs like work together. But there will come a day when I can get my laptop to do it, right? I can hold the function down, and it's like, I tell an LLM, like, hey, add this to my shopping list. Oh, okay, great, cool. Boop, 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 boop. And it sends it off to Todoist. Todoist then updates like my shopping list that I share with my wife. I roll in the shopping, the grocery, and it's all there. I think that, as a futurist, I would say that's coming. That's right around the corner. And the question I would then pose to you, across a lot of brands, you're probably not the Amazon Alexa team or the Siri team here. Sorry if you are. What is going to be the impact to your brand as the follow-on? What is the nature of consumer experience after that? What does the nature of shopping and brand engagement look like with not only AI, but like just all these experiences in the home? What does that look like? Then couple in, call it 5 years from now, maybe 10 at the outset, like AR and VR. Right? I'm shopping for clothes, I'm shopping for this, I get to experience the car in AR and VR. It's really high precision AR and VR to like get a sense for it. What's left? My wife is an interior designer, and she is dealing with like, AR, like AI is coming for interior design, and I say like, yeah, but like it can't do like touch and feel. It can't do experience. You should be selling experience. You should be telling clients like, hey, this is how the sofa will feel. This is how it'll feel to move around that space, and how far you have to reach to grab something. AR can sort of do that. AI can sort of make nice, pretty pictures. It can't do that. That is your value prop. That's what's going to be different in the future. So she's working on that. She's changing that. And that's something that she felt was like totally disconnected from AI. But it's not. So I think my sort of last suggestion is that those are those are the things that the brand experience of the tech experience is going to change that consumer threshold very quickly, and that will ripple out and impact almost every brand and every consumer experience. Be prepared for that now. Start planning for that now. And be wrong, fail a few times, but get in the habit of being nimble with how you respond. So when the shift finally does happen, that GPT-3 moment happens for that new consumer experience, you will be ready to launch and roll out and be like, oh yeah, we got this. We'll be first to market. So, yeah.
Can I get a time check? Because I can't see the countdown.
You're over by about 4 minutes.
Well, that's a shame. Sorry about that. Do we have questions in the audience? Because I could keep going for hours. Who's got a question for James? Anybody? You're just looking forward to the next. Oh, we got one back here. Good. Hey, Rye, would you do me a favor and run the catch box for us? Thank you. Right here in the middle, straight back. Appreciate that. Wait. Oh, you're good.
To go back to your comment about the initiative of this thought of getting AI to dream, you mentioned one of the objectives was to identify some of the gaps in AI research or the white space. Are there any of those that you're comfortable sharing with us?
It was sort of white space broadly in any area. So I can give you, how about call a quick recipe for doing this? And this might be helpful with sort of thinking brand strategy. If you're not doing scenario planning for your brands, you're missing out on like a real strategic opportunity. The quick recipe, I would say, is do like a broad pastel or steeple analysis of society, technology, environment, ethics, legal, policy. So ask it to do a steeple analysis of your field. And then say, okay, list all of the actors and players in this market or this field, and not just your competitors, but anything that might impact your market. So like that could be the president, that could be a tariff, that could be anything. And then say, okay, now go one by one. Pick an actor, like sort of how, why, reasoning ladder. Like pick an actor, pick a reason, have them do something. Pick another actor, pick a reason, have them respond. Go back and forth for like a few rounds. And just do that over and over again. And that's a very sort of quick, shoehorn way to have an AI create a nice little futurist scenario that is somewhat based in fact, and you can sort of add an article based on this article that I just found, or these two articles, or whatever it is. Add a little entropy up front, then run it based on this article, play this game with me. If he does that, it will create this nice little narrative for you of like, well, like imagine this happens. If you do that enough times, you'll start to see like a lot of trends and interesting things that the AI would probably not tell you outright. It's probably not explicitly in an article anywhere, but it's telling you something like latent in the space. One of the things that I found was really interesting, the white space sort of revealed, is that no matter how many times we ran that sort of scenario builder with AI, every single time, teenagers would find a way around something. Always. China does this, and the US does this, and Europe responds to this, and they're like, oh, and then the teenagers found a way around it. Like, I was like, oh man, AI is sort of telling me something about humanity that like, no matter what happens, teenagers are like, yeah, screw the rules, we're doing it anyway, right? And I love that, right? And then like, that happened, and then like a year later, we see algo speak, right? Well, we banned all these bad words on TikTok. Okay, the kids just use different words. Oh, he didn't die, he's unalived. I was like, okay, we all know what that means now. It's weird, but okay, right? So like, it's sort of AI sort of detecting and proving what was a latent thing in the ecosystem that maybe we hadn't put a name on. So, but you can do this with the current models, and you can do it for yourself, and you should do it for your brands. Like play those games out for like what happens if there is an economic drop, an economic boom. Like play those games out, and you will be a lot more prepared to sort of deal with the sort of the brand fallout or the brand opportunities in the future.
Cool. Any other questions? Up front here.
Steve, we're actually at time.
Sorry.
But any other questions that you guys have for James, you can ask him with Steve Ross.
Thank you. James, it's been a pleasure.